All right, Tex, Jeff and I are here. Hey, listen, if you know that this is one of our accounts, Jeff, one of the first things that you've always taught me is identify your outside bait stations.
That's right.
Make sure they're in good shape.
Yep.
So we're gonna come over here.
Now we set these out about, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
And you know, as a technician, of course, when you show up on the structure, you wanna talk to that homeowner first, let them know that you're out here rummaging through the yard, but you wanna check all the things that you did when you set up last time. So you want to check the exclusion, you want to check your baits to make sure you're not getting the feeding, or if you are getting feeding, you may want to move your resources toward that feeding area as well. So we're going to check some of these stations out and see what we get here. So
for our text, Jeff, let me ask you a question. I noticed that this outside bait station isn't level. Does that really matter?
No, it doesn't matter, as long as it's in an area that you think susceptible for rodents.
How about clean?
Clean, you know, they're not real clean animals.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They'll eat the bait regardless. You know, once they start that feeding, they know it's a food source. They're going to continue to feed regardless if leaves and things blow into it.
Right on. So for our text, we wanted A, to look good.
Well, yeah, you always want to keep it clean. A lot of times you'll sign and date it as well. And what I mean by sign and date, there's a label in here that you'll put a sticker in there, and it'll have a date and a time stamp, and you can let people know that you're checking it all the time. That way, let's say the homeowner happens to come home and sees one of them open and looks in there, they can tell that you've been there and that you did open that station and at least put the card in there. So,
hey, for our first time text, when would you suggest to change that block bait out?
Well, I would suggest probably changing that block bait. I'd leave it as long as you can.
Sure.
You know, as long as it's not growing any type of molds on it or getting real pliable to where it's falling off.
Right.
Because, you know, in the summer what happens to, especially for techs, a lot of these baits will start to get hot inside this black box and they'll melt and fall off the stick. So you got to make sure you're removing those and putting new bait on. And then we did some exclusionary work over here. We always want to look at some of the exclusion stuff we did. We did put some material in this gap in here. So, and that, it still feels like it's in there. So for technicians, you know, they always want to check to make sure that, A, that you've sealed the entire hole, B, that nothing's pulled that material out. So, and then we've got another station here as well. We'll take a quick peek at. We only had 2 stations on this structure on the outside. These are exterior rodent stations. Looks good. Looks like there's a little bit of feeding on that back corner in the back. You get some of the small bait laying by itself, means something moved it. So yeah, we should get a little more acceptance as time goes on. But looks good. Child resistant, make sure you snap it all the way down. That way we know nothing else can get into it. That's the important part. We'll go inside and we'll look at some of the stations in there. We're going to look at the bait placements up in that attic space. We'll look at some of the tin cats that we've got put out and some of the RTUs that we have in place. So as a technician, you know, always keep your eye out. You're still looking for holes and gaps as you're going through the structure as well.
Hey, Tex, see these? These are called booties. Look what I do. I don't own the damn place, but put this shit on your feet so that way you're not tracking other shit in. Don't be a dick. See that? My shit's covered.
So we know that we put some bait placements up here. Our goal is to be able to retrieve the baits. You can see one sitting right back in here. You guys can probably see it. And it actually has, and I don't know if you can see right next to that. I know my light's in the way a little bit, but right next to it you have rodent feces. So rodents have already fed on that piece of bait, because right to the right of it you got rodent droppings. So that's a good sign that they've been up here. We know they've been up here. It's just a matter of how many are up here. So populations should start dying off. And then as far as nesting material like this, if you get into a situation, you definitely want to address that with the homeowner about getting that out of here as well. So, because trust me, rodents will use all the nesting material they can find, and they've got hay and straw here is perfect for them. So always be able to retrieve your baits. That's the goal behind block bait placements. Just open baiting. Let's see if we find any more baits in here. but you're always looking as well to see the activity. You can see right there in the insulation, it's definitely being used by rodents. It's either that or Kelly was up here laying there.
It was Anne Frank next to her bed. You don't put Jewish people in the attic.
Oh, nice. Let's see if we got any other block baits laying around here.
Jeff, is it fair to say that you're like a master baiter?
That's right.
That's pretty good.
This piece of bait here, look at that. They're destroying that piece there. And that's only been a couple weeks, so you should be getting that result and seeing a lot of results downstairs and below as well. So you definitely want to keep that communication open with that homeowner about what they're hearing, where they're hearing it. And we've got another piece close by it, but all these can be picked up at any time as well, and we can actually relocate that and use those baits in other places if we need it. So that's the baiting of the attic space. Just make sure, like I said, you can retrieve that bait. That's the important part. Don't just throw it down in that insulation or throw it across the attic to the other end. You got to be able to get to it. And you're always inspecting, looking at different stuff. You know, some of this does look like it might be some rodent feces on top of here, but some of it's probably coming from these boards up top as well that are falling. So just see what's new. You should know if you set it up some of the new and old activity. So always remember what you've seen in places, and always put it on your notes in your pest pack, or write it down for when you return. You're always wanting to inspect, and as you're walking your way out, you can always look on cabinets and shelves and things just real quick to make sure you don't see something new that wasn't there last time. I always look at my shelves because they love to run these shelves. It's like a high-rise for them, so they'll run these shelves, and I don't see anything happening. Homeowner didn't let me know there was anything happening as well, so I think things are progressing very well. Let's take a peek at the kitchen. All right, RTUs. Make sure you don't forget your key. Without a key, if you know what you're doing, with that, this one's been down here 2 weeks. A lot of edges. You don't see any chewing on that. It might not be a good placement. That one looks good. I know we put one under this. Now, sanitizing, you know, it's up to you how you discuss it, but you definitely want to make sure you discuss it with the homeowner. You know, who's going to be responsible for cleaning that up, and then we want to know, once it's cleaned up, are we getting new activity or not? You'll be able to tell with this bait, just because it is green, if you're getting activity, because the feces won't be black like that, it'll be green. And like I said, almost looks like there's some chewing right dead in the middle of it. So yeah, it looks like something's accepted it, so that's a good thing. That's a good start in the first couple weeks anyways. I always tell people give it about 30 days before you really start worrying if the problem's going to be persistent or not. Tin cat, usually the sink area, just because you have this elevation right here. All this is elevated. You can stick your hand back in here. And what happens is it's a false bottom, so rodents love to stay in there. So we want to make sure we're checking that. Of course, you're always looking for evidence in the cabinets that you've been in. I don't see a lot of evidence in here. And then check your glue boards. Normally you have one on there. If you do have a rodent on there, just fold him up and sort of glue all around it so you're not moving him through the house, or make sure you got your gloves on as well. I'm not touching any baits. All the devices are fairly new, so I'm not as concerned about having my gloves on, but you definitely, if you're going to be touching baits and handling the baits, put your gloves and your masks on. That tin cat looked pretty good. And like I said, if you're seeing resources in one area that aren't being effective, go ahead and move those resources somewhere else where you might be getting a little more activity. Let's take a peek in here. We did some exclusionary work in this corner. Doesn't look like anything's chewed it out. So it looks really good. The exclusionary work is stayed in place, which is good. That's what we're always after. If you get it moved or they've chewed a new hole, at least you know it's active. At that point, you can determine what needs to be done in this area, whether you need to run some mouse traps or not. Let's take a peek here. A little easier with both hands. But no activity in it as well. And then again, you still have that sanitation that you got to address too. And you're talking to the homeowner the whole time as well. So make sure that you're keeping that line of communication open, because the homeowner's your friend when it comes to rodent control, animals, pests, the whole deal. So always do your inspecting as you're moving in and out of rooms. See if you see anything new. That's the important part. New, we want to know where it's at and what we've ran into. So we'll check our stations in that basement. Sealing, looking for gaps, anything around the doors, anything like that. Door looks pretty good as far as door sweep's concerned. Always looking for evidence of. Right here is where we saw some of the rubbing of that rodent on here, as well as along this edge. So you can sort of see that discolor. Them are from rodents coming in and out. We sealed that hole up there with the Stuff It product. Seems to be in place and looks really good. So you're still going to do your inspection down here. You're going to look at the stations you may have, and depending on what kind of pest control you're doing, it might be a little more comprehensive, where you get down here and say, well, I'm down here anyways, I'm going to remove some of these cobwebs as well. So depending on the program they're into, whether it's rodents or spiders or whatever, you may want to address maybe taking down some of these spider webs too. So we're going to look at some more RTUs. I like to keep RTUs elevated and off the ground. I didn't have a lot of rodent activity on the floor, but we know they're running the sill plate and running these electric lines, so we went ahead and put our resources up along the sill plate. RTUs, little small bait devices.
Hey, Garrett.
And if you see, I've got a couple. I've got one here, I've got one over here. You got the rodent activity, you nose there because of the opening you see right out of that insulation, so he's definitely been in that space at one time or another. Bait looks pretty good, doesn't look like it's been fed on yet, so but we know that they've definitely been there, so I'm going to leave this one in place just for the sure fact that I'm sitting it right next to a rodent opening. We'll go ahead and check our other one right here. I like to put it around electric. They like to chew on anything they can get to. They love electric lines, so putting the bait in that area, it's not going to attract them to that area, but if they're inside of a structure, they will find it. So bait looks good in that one as well. So I think all that looks pretty good. And like I said, keep doing your inspection throughout the structure and work your way right out of the front door is what I like to do. So you inspect your sill plate a little bit more, see if we got any more stations. I don't really see anything jumping off the page at me on here. I know we've got one down here. Let's take a quick peek at it as well. It's right up in here. So we don't really have a bunch going on here as far as what kind of material we have out. We got a couple outside bait stations. We got some inside bait devices. We came in with baits, and the reason we did that because we didn't want to, we didn't think we had a huge problem here. Not a lot of evidence shown here, so we went straight to baiting, where a lot of times if you got an abundance of rodents, we'll go right into trapping first. So we'll trap maybe once every other day. We'll come back and check all our traps, but we usually will overload a structure like this. We'll use about 50 mouse traps and try to take out as many as we can. So that's sort of our goal. And then once we get the control we want, then we go to the bait process. I didn't think we had to go through all that first right out of the gate, so we went straight to baits. Now we're going to work our way straight to the front door and make sure you address the, and you're doing your inspection, but make sure you're addressing the homeowner as well. So talking to that homeowner, letting them know that, hey, here's what we found, here's what we didn't find, as well as you know, that the communication with you and that homeowner is very important. So you want to make sure you're listening to everything they have to say. And then when you get done, go explain to that homeowner what you've exactly done today. You've looked at your seal work, everything looks good. You looked at all your stations, it looks good. Looks like you're getting some feeding in that attic space, and you're getting some feeding underneath that stove. So those three things you want to definitely let them know, and make sure you're keeping good notes. So if you have another technician following behind you, he's very aware of how many stations he has, where those station placements are, and what's been done.
Hey technicians, this is some of the things, you know, on a follow-up from our 30-day rodent inspections, and then once we implement the service, these are some of the things that you guys need to follow. at any point you have any type of questions, call Jeff.
Supervisors, get a hold of your supervisors, talk to them. If you've got bait being drug out of stations or somebody's in question that something happened with the bait, you definitely want to go to the supervisor first, make sure that gets done. But just follow up, make sure you got your gloves on.
Yeah.
Make sure you got a lot of keys, different keys for your stations.
Shoe covers.
That's the important part. Shoe covers, and then go over with everything with that customer before walking out. Tell them all the things you have done, because if they want something done extra at that point, they may address you then. So it's very important.
Yeah. Remember, guys, when in doubt, call a supervisor. Make sure you have all your productive gear. Follow the label. You always bust
Label's the law.
Label is the law. And if you mess something up, call us immediately. We'll call him immediately. Don't tell Mom. She'll bust your ass.